Well, thanks everyone for joining us for another video in our series about impact insurance and the climate. I'm Amy Amsack, General Counsel at Energetic Insurance, and today I am joined by Travis Stewart, who is the North America Business Development Lead at AXA Climate. Travis, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we're hoping that you can tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and also, I think probably a lot of people are familiar with AXA, the large multinational insurance company, but maybe didn't know that AXA Climate exists. So if you could also tell us a little bit about that part of the company.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, Amy, thank you for asking us to be a part of this. I think it's amazing the journey that GreenieRE and what you guys are working on and its purpose. But to tell and share a little bit about my background. So most of my career has been spent in the agricultural sector, trying to figure out how do we help farmers adapt to new farming practices, in particular, really focusing on the adaptation of climate smart agriculture and how do we utilize the U.S. federal crop program as well as our alternative risk transfer solutions. Coming out of that interest, as I was working on different projects, I would tell you a little bit of the story of AXA Climate and why I'm here with them and why I get so excited about these type of discussions. Early in my career, when I was a broker, I've been working on some projects down in Latin America and trying to find different solutions and how we could help insure lenders' risks as they associate to farmers and especially those that were looking to grow, uh, innovate and expand. And we spent some time going through the European markets and talking to different parametric companies and asking them, what's their appetite. And a lot of them would talk about the perceived risk of climate change and how parametric insurance has a pivotal role to play into that climate change discussion. We kept going from market to market, and a lot of them would talk about the insurance solution, which, in my mind, was a really short-term perspective. But when we met with AXA Climate, they started talking about their three ecosystems. And it was a unique approach to the problem, right? Because climate change isn't just a discussion around how do we insure against it, but rather how do we educate? So how do we better understand it? How do we start taking action against it? And so when we met with AXA Climate, the first presentation came from their AXA Climate School, and it was to me just quite fascinating to have that type of approach. We're first, we're there to meet about reinsurance, we're there to meet about coverage and partnerships and really insurance, right? And instead, we're talking about educating around the impacts, the concerns, what we can do, and all these different subsectors of the climate change discussion. And then as we got done with the discussion about climate change education, we moved into climate consulting. So now that we understand, we're learning how to act, they're now helping deploy, right? So creating blueprints, how do you facilitate this change? How do you identify areas of opportunity? What are your quick wins, short wins? What's your potential risk from a 2030 and 2050 perspective? And so, again, like I said, helping create that blueprint to adaptation, to that transition, and resiliency against climate change. And then at that point, we finally moved into the insurance conversation. Look, realizing that we've got perceived risks that are going to occur on the year-to-year basis because of climate change, and we're not going to change this problem overnight. So we need to de-risk it, and that's where parametric insurance, I think, has a pivotal role to play into this insurance system and this climate change discussion. And again, that's probably one of the more exciting components to the GreenieRE opportunity too. So
Great. Well, thank you so much for that background. I think it's so fascinating to learn more about AXA Climate and their three pillars of education, consulting, and insurance. I'd love to dig in a little bit more about that third pillar, insurance. So you mentioned parametric insurance products for climate risks. So for those of us, including myself here, who aren't very familiar with parametric insurance, can you just explain what that means and the type of risks that parametric insurance covers?
yeah, so parametric insurance, essentially it's index-based insurance. So it's data-driven insurance. We look at the specific peril and the data derived from that peril from a historical perspective, and we can build our structure, our cover around that data set, that climatic event. So for example, in many markets, tropical cyclone or hurricane is probably one of the most transacted parametric cover that's out there. And it's very simplistic in design, right? You've got your physical asset, we set the location, we create a radius around that location, and then we monitor a storm path and the category or the wind speed attached to that storm path. At that point, one of the unique advantages of parametric insurance is we're not necessarily covering the physical damage of that asset. Maybe there was severe interruption because of the event itself. Maybe there was coastal flooding. You lost out on sales. You've got supply chain interruption. You've got all these different non-damage business interruption obstacles and expenses that are associated to it. Or even just as importantly, parametric insurance, because we're driven off that data, right? We can now help accelerate the access to capital in a disaster situation, which I think has a tremendous benefit to helping the recovery process, rebuild. How do you get back up and running even quicker than you would through a traditional insurance program?
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, that must make such a difference for people who have, experienced a catastrophe, a natural disaster. And like you said, that access to capital is just so vital for them to get back on their feet. And it sounds like it really speeds up the process and they don't have to spend so much time with the claims process, with providing the evidence of damage, because sometimes there isn't damage and it's business interruption insurance coverage, like you said. So that's really interesting. Just thinking about decarbonization and our climate goals, and I'm thinking about renewable energy. So there's lots of risks there with the deployment of renewable energy, and I'm wondering how parametric insurance can be involved there. I'm thinking about solar panels. Obviously, hail risk is a big risk that we have with solar farms, with wind projects. We think about wind production and the risk that there's not going to be a significant or as much wind production as expected. Is that something that parametric insurance can help with?
Absolutely. I think if we first carve out the hail discussion on solar panels or PV panels and solar farms distributed across the U.S. market, right? We continue to see different challenges placed by the traditional insurance market regarding whether that's increased deductibles or increased limits. And parametric insurance has a role to play there. You can utilize synthetic hail data derived from both radar or ground truthing source to both discover what the historical analysis was, which then gives us the ability to calibrate the actual losses that have occurred, and then structure both a strike and an exit or a trigger associated to the hail size and the actual damage that would be perceived on the solar panels themselves. So I think there's a great application there, especially if you're thinking of, the initial investment, the cost to recoup, the energy demands as we continue to put more and more dependency on solar panels or renewable energy sources. The timeliness of that recovery is going to become that much more critical. And in those
Definitely.
cases, that parametric insurance has a critical role to play because of that more immediate settlement when losses occur. I think when you go to the wind industry, the turbine industry, I think it's quite fascinating to think, today there's a lot of transactions already in the marketplace that protect against wind production, just like there are in the solar industry on solar radiation production or sunlight production. There's also that potential to look at it from a property perspective, right? You can utilize these same wind speed tech covers, tornado, for instance, to help protect your wind turbines as we continue to see those carve out a portion of the renewable energy space. But by all means, they're traditional risks, they're traditional perils, and parametric insurance has a big role to play in how we can deploy those covers into the marketplace.
That's great. Do you have any success stories that you could share about parametric insurance helping in the climate space beyond what we just talked about?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of amazing success stories. In particular, within AXA Climate, we've had opportunities to utilize parametric insurance to help farmers adapt to climate smart agricultural practices, which is a fascinating concept. It was as we continue to see the initiatives expand around agriculture and the supply chain and the carbon intensity associated to farming practices in general, let alone the resiliency of our food in production agriculture, where we grow it, how we grow it. Parametric insurance is proving out that it has a role to play to help facilitate and accelerate the adaptation of these climate smart agricultural practices. And I think that'll continue to be the case. I think even as we discuss the solar industry, just being able to carve out and find solution in an area that the traditional insurance market may push back and say, look, we just can't deploy the capital at those levels. I think that's a great advantage when you think of the investors finding security in their investment and they deploy capital for these projects and being able to understand and realize that there's expedited recoveries We've seen Parametric Insurance Solutions, for example, AXA Climate just participated on a mangrove product in Mexico. Then it's just fascinating, protecting mangroves across the shorelines in conjunction with both the Mexican government and a group of Mexican ranchers as we help protect those mangroves. We're exploring projects to cover tree emergence. There's once you open it up, it's a bit of a Pandora's box because there's a lot of different solutions we can explore.
Yeah, well, it sounds like a Pandora's box in a good way if we're
Yeah.
looking for solutions to the climate catastrophe. Yeah, well, as we wrap up our discussion, I'm just curious about, innovations in parametric insurance, but also challenges and how we could get more coverage for renewables.
Yeah, I think, as you're seeing the insurance market continue to accelerate the discussion around impact insurance, how do we create more resiliency in the marketplace? How do we help facilitate the adaptation, sustainability? You think of the regen conversations coming to the marketplace. That means there's a big, uh, should we say, renavigation of the funds, right? Chasing after these new opportunities because there's a need, right? We need to do it for our societies. We need to do it for our businesses. We have a purpose within our cultures and our communities to do something about this climate change discussion and the impending risks that are coming. As we start looking at some of these 2030 and 2050 projections, it's quite scary and quite a stark reality of what if we hit these numbers? If we hit the worst case, what does our day-to-day look like when it comes to climate disasters? And because of that, I think there's ever increasing interest to solve that, to
Right.
create the education, and to come up with solutions to help us transition to new practices and to help accelerate that in the marketplace.
Definitely. And, it sounds like parametric insurance is really filling some of those gaps in the market. And, with respect to insurance, there's still lots of gaps that need to be bridged. And hopefully, GreenieRE, our impact insurer that we're working on creating now, can work together with AXA Climate to fill some of those gaps and get more of these projects deployed and get them covered. Because even if they get deployed, there's still tons of risks, as we all know, in the insurance industry. So we're hoping to get as much coverage as we possibly can for all these renewable projects and other solutions to the climate problem. So this has been really interesting to learn more about AXA Climate and what you're doing with parametric insurance. And if anyone has any questions about what AXA Climate is doing and the products that they offer, please reach out to Travis Stewart or check out axaclimate.com. That's the correct website, right?
Yes.
Great. And thank you so much, Travis, for joining us today. And thanks to everyone for watching.